Hey, trucked up guys and gals, I've tried to keep politics out of my channel. And I hope to continue to do that to some level. In Canada, I've got many friends and colleagues who are from every end of the political spectrum. And I'm certain my viewership is similar to that spectrum. And I celebrate keeping it that way, that we can all have an open dialogue and not care about anyone's political affiliation. This channel is about electric trucks, how cool they are, where they need to change, where they need to improve, where they totally ace it, what's coming in the future, and getting out there and showcasing trucked up folk from all walks of life. That's what this channel is all about. But here it is. By celebrating EV trucks and their adoption in the current political minefield of polarized everything, anything I say is somehow politically charged anyway. When the new head of the US's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is also the CEO of America's largest EV manufacturer, I'm no longer sure any trustworthy, dedicated EV channel can navigate any EV topic without sounding political. But what is happening right now in the US is so disruptive, it could put American EV innovation and adoption on the back burner for years to come while the rest of the world races ahead. The ramifications will be felt in every home and in every business in the Western world. Why? We've entered unprecedented and tumultuous times that has the US auto market reeling in complete disarray as the domestic goalposts just keep shifting as they're trying to navigate the worst upheaval in US automotive history since the Japanese auto domination in the 1970s during the oil crisis. But for my trucked up guys and gals, for you, the biggest concern is how the US is introducing some of the most regressive, protectionist, and isolationist policies in almost a century, directly targeting EVs and thus EV trucks, involving every aspect of their production, distribution, and infrastructure. This is nothing short of an outright war on electric vehicles in America. How dangerous is this? Let's dive into the details and get totally trucked up. So first, what the heck just happened? Every global auto manufacturer just, had a freaking cardiac because their entire world was turned upside down with an out of the blue Trump-created existential crisis that didn't need to happen at all, that threatens to gut the auto industry's profits, upend their entire supply chain. Keep in mind that to build one automobile factory involves billions of dollars and years of development, and to make such an investment viable requires the stability of knowing that the company can recoup all the freaking costs over the lifespan of the factory. But it's all been put into great jeopardy here. We're talking tariffs, massive tariffs. Their outcome threatening complete annihilation of interconnected and mutually beneficial relationships that extend back at least 3 decades in Mexico and over a century here in Canada. We're talking upending a whopping $300 billion in trade with US neighbors. And that's annually. Even more shocking is that number is just in North America. Trump's tariffs now threaten all international auto trade using a protectionist approach that has never ended well in the past and likely won't this time either, attempting to curb the wave of EVs coming out of China and global supply chains to force companies to flock to America and to stick to internal combustion engines that drive the oil and gas industry. First, let's look at the most brutal of these. And that means, well, a little history lesson. Because most of you know, but those are people who are somewhere around my age or older or slightly younger. I'm not holding that against you. Anyway, for those who aren't, you won't know this because you weren't born. You weren't alive. Back in the 1980s, Republican President Ronald Reagan put forth negotiated and introduced the FTA, or Free Trade Agreement, between Canada and the United States with then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Had a big chin. He talked like this. You couldn't understand the thing he said. You can't understand a thing I see either. Anyway.
Once a country yields its energy.
We have not done it.
Once a country yields its agriculture.
Wrong
Once
again.
a country opens itself up to a subsidy war with the United States
Wrong
on
again.
terms of definition, then the political ability of this country to sustain the influence of the United States, to remain as an independent nation, that is lost forever, and that's the issue of this election.
Mr. Turner, I today, sir, as a Canadian, believe genuinely in what I am doing. I believe it is right for Canada. I believe that in my own modest way, I am nation building because I believe this benefits Canada.
We built a country, east and west and north. We built it on an infrastructure that deliberately resisted the continental pressure of the United States. For 120 years, we've done it. With one signature of a pen, you've reversed that, thrown us into the north-south influence of the United States, and will reduce us, I'm sure, to a colony of the United States, because when the economic levers go, the political independence is sure to fall.
Mr. Turner, with a document that's cancelable on 6 months' notice, be serious.
My fellow Americans, if someone were to ask us as a nation who our best friends are, what would be the answer? It's difficult to imagine any better friends than our neighbors, the Canadians. Our two peoples have lived side by side in peace and with a spirit of goodwill for the better part of 2 centuries. Winston Churchill once noted, "That long Canadian frontier from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans, guarded only by neighborly respect and honorable obligations, is an example to every country and a pattern for the future of the world." Unquote. Churchill, as usual, was as profound as he was eloquent. It wouldn't surprise him to find out that the citizens of Canada and the United States are moving together toward a truly historic achievement. Last week, Prime Minister Mulroney and I entered into a free trade agreement which, once approved by the United States Congress and the Canadian Parliament, will establish our two countries as the world's largest free trade area. The U.S.-Canadian Free Trade Agreement is the culmination of 18 months of strenuous negotiations between our governments. Both Prime Minister Mulroney and I played an active role in the process, keeping the negotiations on track and ensuring that the outcome would be absolutely fair and equitable. Frankly, I think we've come up with a winner for people on both sides of the border. Canada and the United States are already each other's largest trading partners. Our bilateral trade in goods and services exceeded $150 billion in 1986. The economic health and national security of our countries are linked. This well-honed treaty will build on these ties that already exist and open up tremendous new potential.
Raw materials, parts, and end products, the cars, could now move freely, a seamless process that kept American auto manufacturers in the game. They had skin in the game, competing directly against this massive invasion from Asia, from Japan, from European countries. It made them competitive and even led to foreign manufacturing moving to Canada and the US to produce their vehicles. This really strengthened the America-only alliance, and it created its own equally competitive response to all of that. It was so successful that 4 years later, Mexico joined, creating a Western powerhouse of 3 nations where trade could freely move without tariffs and taxation. The North American Free Trade Agreement was then formed, called NAFTA, and that went into effect in 1994, I think. Now, fast forward to 2017, when then President Donald Trump planned to impose serious tariffs and penalties. He was going to breach the frickin' agreement with the alliance and to completely dismantle NAFTA unless it was rewritten, demanding from an automotive perspective updated rules of origin for automobiles and stricter labor standards for the automotive production itself. In 2018, President Trump, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto signed CUSMA. In fact, he tried to do USMCA. That was he wanted it to be US first, MCA, Mexico-Canada Agreement, but somebody owned it or something. He couldn't say USMCA, so it became CUSMA. And that replaced NAFTA in 2020. Here's what Trump declared himself after signing it.
I'm thrilled to speak to the American people to share truly historic news for our nation, and indeed for the world. We have successfully completed negotiations on a brand new deal to terminate and replace NAFTA with an incredible new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement called USMCA. It sort of just works. MCA. This is a terrific deal for all of us. Once approved by Congress, this new deal will be the most modern, up-to-date, and balanced trade agreement in the history of our country, with the most advanced protections for workers ever developed. If you look at the reviews, people that would normally not under any circumstances say good things, because automatically they have to say bad. Even some Democrats say that's amazing. We had some, they haven't been given the sound bites yet, I guess, Mike. But actually you had some Democrats say this is really amazing if he really got all of that.
In other words, Trump lauded his New Deal. He claimed it was the best trade agreement in U.S. history. Great! Until today. At the time of this recording, he's done it again. Canada and Mexico are about to be slapped with a massive 25% tariff on all goods, everything entering the U.S., breaching United States' own agreement it signed in good faith, undermining everything the global auto sector, especially American auto manufacturers, have spent decades building. But it gets worse. Here's what AP News reported, and I quote, "If the president goes ahead with 25% taxes on imports from Canada and Mexico on Tuesday, he will disrupt more than $300 billion in annual U.S. automotive trade with its two neighbors, wreck supply chains that have been operating for decades, and likely push up the already forbidding price of new cars." Kelley Blue Book says Trump's tariffs could raise the U.S. price of the average new car, already approaching $49,000, by $3,000 or more. The price of some full-size pickup trucks could shoot up by $10,000. Holy frickin' crap. Then factor in that Canada and Mexico won't tolerate this kind of unjustified abuse without counterpunching. So you're going to see, reciprocal stuff coming out of everywhere. And that'll be brutal and exponential, directly impacting all three countries with further cost spikes. Think about this. Canada buys millions of cars from the U.S. In fact, Canada and Mexico are the top two foreign markets for U.S.-built cars and light trucks, accounting for, get this, 53% of America's auto exports. Yeah, you heard that right. This is the pariah. This is what drives the economy. But just to throw more gasoline on an already raging inferno, Trump just escalated huge tariffs on China, and more are threatened for all of Europe, many designed to stop incredibly inexpensive and highly competitive Chinese and Asian EVs from entering the U.S. market and undermining their drill baby drill, make coal great again, frickin' insanity. But that's not the end of it. No, not even close. Trump just got this locomotive of economic death up to speed. And now, here's when he directs the whole EV train right off a cliff. The Trump administration just announced plans to suspend the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. Yeah, acronyms. That's right, which allocated $5 billion to support the development of public charging stations with the goal of a nationwide network of EV charging stations every 50 miles, which would be freaking brilliant. It's called infrastructure. We've invested in every country into infrastructure, bridges, roads. When the advent of the automobile reached a certain point, we needed paved roads, then we needed highways, then we needed freeways, then we needed bridges. Those are all infrastructures for the automobile. When oil and gas was in higher demand, all the different refineries and drilling and roads and access to places where these drills were and to wells, most of it was subsidized through some kind of infrastructure program. So infrastructure programs have led to a lot of the advancement of things that we use every day. So EVs are no different by advancing the infrastructure for charging stations, just if anyone's going to go off on a rant on that one. Because the counter rant is, we've been doing it for absolutely everything else both in Canada and United States, with charging infrastructure as the primary sticking point holding back Americans from buying EVs, canceling the infrastructure program seems specifically designed to bulldoze adoption in America. Now just imagine, just for a moment, the boardrooms of the auto sector right now. Just walk in. Let's just be a fly on the wall. Tens of billions have already been invested, and tens of billions more have been allocated for innovation, for the electrification of their fleets, and in production and manufacturing. And it's all a big blotch of red on their spreadsheet. Now, everyone is hitting the hold button on just about everything, including American auto jobs, because, well, why manufacture anything if no one has a freaking clue what's coming next? And can anyone afford to buy what they make if the tariffs are through the freaking roof? None of the CEOs have any idea what's coming next, because every day or two, Trump processes another Big Mac and gets his second wind, and pow, he goes off on a tangent that threatens another few billion out of the economy. No intelligent business leader will stay in a business as usual mode until they have at least a sense of how to plan. Billions of dollars a day lie in the balance here. And if the rug is being pulled out from under the fastest growing auto segment, EVs, only to have to revert back to internal combustion engine designs that have been falling in demand, and where no research and development has gone for the past 6 years, will consumers pay 15 to 20% or 20 to 25% more for the same outdated vehicle? Well, survey after survey shows, and current sales numbers, they say absolutely frickin' not. Again, let's go back to the AP article for a moment. What's more, the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico would come atop higher taxes Trump intends to impose on foreign steel and aluminum starting March 12th. Trump is removing exemptions on the metal tariffs that he imposed in his first term, 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, and raising the levy on aluminum to 25%. That means U.S. importers, including auto companies, would pay 50% duties on steel and aluminum from Canada and Mexico, big sources of the metals needed. You're talking about the material costs going up every time a part goes into one market and comes back, said K. Venkatesh Prasad, Senior Vice President of Research at the Center for Automobile Research. The higher costs would take a toll. A decade ago, Prasad said, the lowest earning 20% of American consumers couldn't afford a new car. Already, he said, the bottom 40% of the population is not able to afford a new vehicle. Ford CEO Jim Farley has complained that so far what we're seeing is a lot of cost and a lot of chaos. Regardless of one thinks of any administration, data conclusively shows that the Biden-era Inflation Reduction Act was actually working in bringing back American jobs and investment from across the ocean. And the NEVI program was doing exactly what the current administration, the Trump administration, says it intends to do: create U.S. jobs, bring innovation back stateside, and advance domestic production. According to the World Resources Institute, the Inflation Reduction Act, after only 1 year, had reversed the U.S.'s manufacturing decline, a multi-decade decline, and brought back jobs where none had been in decades. The law has already unleashed a manufacturing renaissance by nearly doubling the amount of manufacturing construction in just 1 year, with forecasts of even higher growth in years to come. Since its passage, makers of battery components, wind and solar equipment, and electric vehicles have announced tens of billions of dollars of new investments, bringing significant local opportunities with them. Between August of 2022 and July of 2023 alone, 272 new clean energy projects were announced in 44 states. These will generate more than 170,000 new jobs in small towns and big cities alike, with Michigan, Georgia, South Carolina, California, and Texas leading the way. Well, all of this has been sabotaged in favor of that old broken system on steroids, the one we once called trickle-down economics. Vast sums of money are being redirected to unprecedented corporate tax breaks, while a record-breaking gutting is underway of all of the public programs, including NEVI. Will any of this work? Well, history is the best indicator of what shouldn't be done. Unfortunately, the US is currently doing all of it anyway, all at once, and the result will likely be equally catastrophic. Firstly, let's look at protectionism for a moment, shall we? Especially when it comes to the auto sector. It doesn't stop anything. If you try that approach, it eventually fails. In fact, evidence supports that it only weakens the country's industry it is trying to protect. Here's a fun fact. Outside of the US, EV adoption is racing right along, and investment and innovation and tech is accelerating, not slowing. In just the first 2 months of 2025, EV sales in Europe are up 37%. Tesla's down, but everything else is on the way up. And even when you take out Tesla's catastrophic sales in Europe, the overall adoption, sales of EVs, is still up 37%. Meanwhile, the US is trying to turn the clock back to oil and gas. But let's pause for a moment. Let's just picture if the US is actually successful in its endeavor. What if it actually does turn back the clock and internal combustion engines zoom ahead, EVs get dumped, all the infrastructure is reversed? What then? The US would be an island of outdated, regressive transportation policy and product, while the rest of the world is decades ahead. Nobody else in the world is slowing down. This is an anomaly of America. China, Norway, the entire Scandinavian countries, even Eastern Bloc Europe, all the big European countries, Spain, France, Britain, Canada even. We are seeing adoption rates increase, in some cases exponentially. The big three are already flopping with their exports and overseas manufacturing as their sales plummet in Europe and China. China is going up vertically, but the big three vehicles are already failing to compete with what is coming off the Asian assembly lines. In the 1970s, the US used protectionism to slow the tidal wave of cheap, incredibly well-made Japanese automobiles flooding the domestic market. The big three were producing outdated monster jalopies using old techniques that had horrible warranties and reliability track records that spoke volumes to inefficiency and poor productivity, and were simply no match for the Japanese onslaught. Even with all the US's protectionist efforts, none of them worked. Half of you watching this are probably driving a Toyota. None worked other than maybe some slowdown in the luxury segment. Chrysler was bailed out of bankruptcy in 1979 with the government holding all of its assets as collateral. It took that wave of competition to wake up the domestic automakers and improve their products. Protectionism didn't save them. It almost killed them. A kick in the nuts from competition, well, that seemed to work. But let's go back a little further. In 1930, the US almost destroyed itself. Yeah, it almost self-combusted. And you know how it did it? Again, attempting something similar, introducing the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. It sounds horrible, and it was. The swift and brutal retaliatory measures after it was introduced, that was meted out by the rest of the world, just smote the US economy. Just a devastating blow to the Americans, and is often cited as the primary instigator of the Great Depression, not the 1929 crash. It reduced American exports and imports by 67%, just obliterating the nation's economy. Yeah, that's what the Protectionist Tariff Act of 1930 did. That didn't work, did it? Guess what? History doesn't repeat itself, But it sure in the heck rhymes. Let's step back even further to an even more extreme example, and we can see the profound effect of isolationism on an entire country. But let me also take this moment to ask you for your continued support. Pick up one of my Truck Top t-shirts. These help a lot, by the way, and they're very stylish and trendy and sexy. You can also support the channel through my growing Patreon flat tire and coffee fund that's down in the description below. Starting in the spring, I'll be delivering exclusive benefits and content for my Patreon supporters, so please join us in the description below. If it's not in your budget, no problem. Thank you anyway. Click the like, subscribe, and bell notification icon. That keeps the algorithms happy and my channel growing. My sincere thanks for all your support. Now, back to closing the doors on everything. Isolationism and protectionism. Yeah, that typically leads to very unnatural, unpleasant national outcomes. Tokugawa era Japan. It just closed the doors. It just put a big fence, yellow tape around their entire country and told the world to go blow itself. And it did, and isolated the entire nation for, 3 centuries in an attempt to preserve its cultural purity from outside aliens. Gaijin translates to alien. At the dawn of the Meiji Restoration in 1867, a few hundred years later, Japan reopened its doors again to international engagement, only to discover that it's so horribly stagnated that it resembled a pre-industrial feudal artifact while the world had moved on without it. Basically, it was a living fricking time capsule museum. It took decades and decades of massive technological acceleration and societal upheaval just to reach a semblance of catching up. The fact is that massive tariffs slapped on longtime friends and trading partners is going to accomplish only one thing. It's going to destroy everything. It will destroy an efficient and job-producing auto sector. It will sour century-strong relationships with democratic countries in favor of expanding alliances with despots and dictators. It's going to cost millions of jobs and stifle innovation and growth, while clearly ending the United States' role as a global leader in the eyes of the entire frickin' world. Nothing good will come of this, especially for EV trucks, especially for what this channel celebrates and loves. This is a war the U.S. has already lost because there is no enemy other than the one fabricated in someone's one-sided brain for one-sided gain. The world is advancing and divesting already from its newly minted hostile America. China, not exactly known for democracy, but guess what? It's rapidly investing in battery tech, self-driving, EV, IP, and global supply chains. Along with Korea's Hyundai and Kia, Europe is already planning an economic and defense future without the United States. One of the most important speeches out of Europe in decades amplified this message that the U.S. is no longer in a leadership role in the nation's eyes of Europe. I provided a link to that epic video with subtitles below. I expect the big three will, of course, embrace anything that preserves their profits, and we can expect even further backpedaling on vehicle innovation for the next 4 years. What does this mean for electric trucks and their adoption? GM seems to have found the secret sauce for their EV division. Way to go, GM. You led, Mary. I'm saying that in a fun way. But actually, we're all eating crow because GM did. Although some of their most highly popular models, like the new Equinox EV or is it the Blazer EV, they're made in Mexico. What do you think is going to happen there? They're going to have to navigate some pretty rough stuff to make this still work. Rivian stands to gain and continue to move forward. They're a U.S. company. They're not influenced by purchases through any kind of incentives because I believe most of their vehicles are above this incentives cap in the United States. I know they are in Canada. Not quite sure on that, but I don't think any qualify. So people are buying them because they love them. So it hasn't affected anything. Sales have been going up. So they seem to be in a pretty good position. And we expect Hyundai and BYD, they're just going to they're going to build up and prepare their supply chains. They're going to build up their IP. They're going to work on their tech and their battery density. They're going to line up the replacement, the next gen of Shark. They're going to be sitting there just waiting and whittle away at the perimeters of the foolish tariff wall built on a house of cards. And if push comes to shove, Places like Canada and Mexico might soon have Chinese truck manufacturers within its borders running those factories that were once owned by American firms, along with Mexico and other welcoming South American countries. If a bully thinks its victims will simply sit idle, lick its wounds, and take the boot to the face, it has another thing coming. I expect electric trucks will continue to now be outpaced by hybrids, as it is the safest, most profitable corporate bet while the current administration rules, despite the fact that few of them come anywhere close to delivering any large measurable benefit. If you want to learn more on that, you'll definitely want to check out this video right here. In the meantime, the world is in flux, as are the futures of every EV truck. We're just going to see how it plays out. As always, thanks for watching.